Hello, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. This is the last group presentation. The topics is about coordination and more. My name is Abimanyu Hermawan, and then my partner is Fikri Haikal. He will take the presentation over when we are going to number 6 from the presentation here, and let's get into it. So, number 1, non-headed construction. Coordination is the syntactic relationship between elements with equal status which then join to make a larger unit. And these elements, on the gen is good teacher, red line, white line on here, it is called the coordinates. And the word and or maybe but is the most common used coordinators in English. And also, to remember, coordinates needs to be in the same status. They need to be equal. So they cannot be distinguished as head versus dependent, like in any other construction in grammar. And so that is why coordination is called non-headed construction, because when you split the coordinates, the coordination, the sentence of the coordination, when you split them, they can stay as they are. They need not a head or anything, so they can be independent. And moving on to the next slide. Here is the syntax of coordination. And the first one is the internal syntax. The internal syntax is basically just about the composition of the structure of coordination. And here you can see that coordinator indicates particular relation holding between the coordinates. However, there is a difference between the relation holding between the coordinates and the position of the coordinator in the structure. So, to make it clear, let's see the example from the slide 2. Jane is a good teacher, and her students really like her. This sentence, as I said before, has two parts, so they can be split. So the first is the clause. Jane is a good teacher. Then the second one, and her students really like her. It is also a clause, but it is marked by coordinator, which is and. And so the use of coordinator can be distinguished by two: bare coordinate, and expanded coordinate. What is a bare coordinate? Bare coordinate is a clause, so they are just coordinate. They're not included in coordination yet. Like the example before, Jane is a good teacher. That is a bare coordinate. And then expanded coordinate. It means it expands the meaning of the sentence. So the example from the slide 2, and her students really like her, it is an expanded coordinate. And moving on to external syntax. And as you can read, it is about where the placement of the coordinates. And you can see that coordination needs to be of the equal status. Equal states or equal status is the same. So when coordination is separated, they can stand as a dependent clause, like I said before. And the fact that it is usually replaceable by any one of the coordinates That is also the reason why the coordination is called a non-headed construction, because of the ability to stand as a dependent when they are separated. So what makes it different? Let's take a look at the example here. You can see the example of the head plus dependent sentence on the left, and you can see the coordination example on the right. Here on the left is Pat is very young, Ed is fond of kids. They are both correct, but they are head plus dependent structure. When they are divided into two clauses, they cannot stand as a one clause. They cannot be like that, because Pat is very. You can see that very doesn't explain anything to Pat. You need to explain what does very refer to. And here, Ed is fond. You also need to explain what fond refers to from Ed. And also it goes to the next example. But on coordination, you can see the example. I went in and sat down. So when they are divided, they can still stand as a dependent clause. They need not a head to make them. And you can see, I went in. It's already a dependent clause. They need not an addition or anything. And the next one is I sat down. It is also already clear. I sat down. You need not any other further explanation from that clause. And that's about external syntax, the placement. Basically, it is just about the placement of coordinate and why is it like that. And let's move to the next, distinctive syntactic properties. So here, the prototypical coordination has three properties: an unlimited number of coordinates, their coordinates must be syntactically similar, and impossibility of repositioning an expanded coordinate. So let's go to the next slide. Here, the unlimited, which means that a coordinate can have two or more coordinates, because there is no grammatical limit on how many there can be. And you can see the example. In the first example, it has four coordinates: juice, wine, milkshake, and lemonade. And the coordinator is M. As for the B, we have 6 coordinates. So there are really no limits for how many you want to use coordinates in a sentence. So that is why it is called unlimited. And the next one, where coordinates must be syntactically similar. So you can see the example. He felt tired and depressed and listless. They are the same feelings. They are similar in the meaning. Tired, depressed, listless. It's all about the tiredness of a person, and so they are similar. And that is why coordinates must be syntactically similar. And also, to note, the function of the coordinate is more important than the category. So you may see a sentence where the sentence is of the same category, like noun phrase plus noun phrase, or prepositional phrase plus prepositional phrase. It is good sometimes, but the meaning sometimes doesn't work. The function doesn't work. So you need to look at the function more than the category. Also, the last one, the main clause needs to be relative. So the main clause when you use coordination needs to be relative. Okay? And moving on to impossible to use preposition on an expanded coordinate. It means that when you are using coordinate, especially expanded coordinate, you can't use it with preposition. As you can see in the first example of A, with the star or apostrophe in it, a star. But they are not members. They attend dinner. It is grammatically incorrect. And you can see in the B, although they are not members, they attended the dinner. So you can see, when we use a preposition on an expanded coordinate, the function will behave differently. The meaning will also change. As in A, but they are not members, they attended the dinner. The function is wrong. But if we want to use but in sentence for coordination, we can correct it to they attended the dinner, but they are not members. And it is correct grammatically. So if we use but in the first place as a preposition, we cannot do that. The function will be different and the meaning will also different. And let's go to the next slide. The order. I will read this. In the simplest cases, the order of coordinates can be changed without changing the interpretation of the coordination. And there are two types from this order, symmetrical and asymmetrical. Symmetrical, let's see the example. We can have beans or broccoli. And next, we can have broccoli or beans. They are symmetrical. I was hungry and tired. I was tired and hungry. They are also symmetrical. Why? Because the order of the coordinates can be changed into one to another. Let's say another example like I have book and pen. You can switch it to one another. I have pen and book. It's the same. So it is symmetrical. It's like that. And asymmetrical. So see the first example. We were left high and dry. This is a fossilized expression, so it is fixed and you cannot change the order of the words. If you change it, it doesn't have a meaning. Like in the example, we were left dry and high. It doesn't have any meanings, and that is why it is called fossilized expression. And B, it's stuck. I get up and had breakfast. And into B, I had breakfast and get up. Here, the meaning is different. As to C to the B first B, I get up and had breakfast. So, to explain it, I get up first and then I have breakfast. But if you are seeing the other structure, I had breakfast and get up. So, when in bed, I have breakfast first. And then after finishing it, I get up. That is why it is called asymmetrical. because when you change the order of the coordinates, it also changes the meaning. And let's move on to the next slide. The marking of coordination. I will read again. The most common pattern of coordination is where the coordinator is introducing the final coordinate. There are three other patterns that is possible to be used: unmarked coordination, repetition of coordinator, correlative coordination. Let's explain that. Unmarked coordination. Sometimes coordinator is not used. Yeah, you can do that. Why? Because coordinator also have comma. Comma is also considered as coordinator, but it is used to form a list. Like in the example, he felt tired, depressed, listless. They form a list of coordinates. They don't need an and. If we want to use and, we go back again to this. So this unlimited. And where coordinates must be syntactically similar. We can go back to that again. But to make it simpler, we can use commas as to form a list and to make an efficiency from forming a structure. Also, to the next example, did they ever offer you red wine, white wine, beer? And it is also a list. And to note, remember, they need to be similar. They need to be same. They need to be of equal states, so you are not confused when you are seeing the sentence. And move on to repetition. Using repetition for coordinator gives more emphasis on the expression used. And here is the same example with different coordinator. He felt tired and depressed and listless. Why we use and is to give an emphasis. He felt tired and depressed and listless. Next example, they offered us a choice of red wine or white wine or beer. You can see the emphasis I used by saying the coordinator or the expression. And move on to the correlative coordination. I will read. In correlative, the coordinate can be marked by one of the determinatives, both, either, and neither, then paired respectively with and, or, and, nor. So let's go to the example. It's one of those movies that you will either love or hate. The next example, neither Sue nor her husband supported the plan. So it is basically correlative words. When you use either, you have to use or, because it is the order. When you use neither, you have to use nor, because the meaning will be different if you use neither and or. It is also grammatically incorrect. And when you want to use both, you use and for the expanded coordinate or the expanded coordinate. And that's it from me. And we will move to my friend Haikal for the part 2. So yeah, Haikal, the time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Fikri Haikal. My ID number is 193200068. Now I will continue our presentation about coordination and more. The first one, I will explain about layered coordination. As you can see, we have three examples of layered coordination here. In layered coordination, there is more than one coordination. It means one coordination can itself be the coordinate of the larger coordination. Let's identify the first example. Kim works in a bank and Pat is the teacher, but Sam is still unemployed. It is the larger coordination. Kim works in a bank and Pat is a teacher is the lower level coordination, but it also functioning as the coordinate of the larger coordination, but is the coordinator of the larger coordination. Sam is still unemployed is the coordinate of the larger coordination. Kim works in a bank is the coordinate of the lower level coordination and is the coordinator of the lower level coordination. Pat is a teacher is the coordinate of the lower level coordination. Next, I will explain about main clause and lower level coordination. Let's take a look to the examples. It was a perfect day and everyone was in good spirits. It is a main clause coordination. Why? Because the coordinates are main clauses, not nouns, not verbs, not phrases. Compared to the example of the lower level coordination, he made a mistake or changed his mind. We met my bank manager and her husband at the airport. She introduced me to her mother and father. Those are the lower level coordination because the coordinates are in form of verb or nouns or phrases. Now I will explain about equivalent, main clause, and lower level coordination. In many cases, lower-level coordination can be expanded into a logically equivalent main clauses. Let's compare the examples of lower-level coordination and the examples of main clause coordination. He made a mistake or changed his mind can be expanded to he made a mistake or he changed his mind. So logically, the example of main clause coordination is equivalent to the example of lower level coordination. They have the same subject, they have the same topic. It's about him made a mistake or changed his mind. The second example, we met my bank manager and her husband at the airport can be expanded to we met my bank manager at the airport and we met her husband at the airport. However, maybe the sequence or the order of the events is different. In the lower level coordination, we met my bank manager and her husband at the airport. It seems that the events occurred at the same time. So they met the bank manager and her husband at the same time. While in the other side, in the main clause coordination, we met my bank manager at the airport and we met her husband at the airport. It seems that the events occurred separately. The events occurred at different times. So we could be more likely to infer from the main clause coordination that they met the bank manager first. After that, they met her husband. Next slide is about non-equivalent main clause and lower level coordination. Please take a look to the examples. In 1A, one teacher was popular and patient. It is lower level coordination. And in 1B, one teacher was popular and one teacher was patient. It is a main clause coordination. 1A and 1B are not logically equivalent because 1A it talks about one teacher, only one teacher with two properties. On the other hand, in 1B, it talks about two different teachers. One teacher who was patient and one teacher who was popular. Now I will explain about joint versus distributive coordination. Look at the examples. In 1A, Kim and Pat are fine players. The property of being a fine player applies to each coordinate. It applies to Kim and Pat separately. It means a distributive coordination can be extended to a main class coordination. It will become Kim is a fine player and Pat is a fine player. But in 1b, the property of a good pair applies to the two of them jointly, not separately. It applies only if Kim and Pat together. So a joint coordination would not be logically equivalent to its main clause coordination form. Moreover, its main clause coordination form has no clear meaning. What is that mean by Kim is a good pair and Pat is a good pair? Basic coordination. The basic coordination has the following properties. The first one, the coordination consists of a continuous sequence of coordinates. The second one, the coordinates are either bare or expanded by a coordinator or determinative. The third property is the coordinates can occur as constituent in non-coordination constructions. Now I will explain about non-basic coordination. Expansion of coordinates by modifiers. An expanded coordinate can contain a modifier as well as or instead of a marker. Now look at the examples. She can speak French but not German. The underlying expression are neither marker of the relation between the coordinates nor part of the bare coordinate. The underlined expression are modifiers of the coordinates in which they are located. So, note in the first example, only modifies German. It doesn't modify another coordinate. Not in the second example, only modify angry. And rather, in the second example, only modify deeply disappointed. Now I will explain about next gap coordination. The middle part of a non-initial coordinate can be omitted if it is recoverable from the corresponding part of the initial coordinate. Look at the example of gap coordination. Her son lives in Boston and her daughter in Chicago. The gap mark is understood by reference to the first coordinate. So, her son lives in Boston and her daughter in Chicago can be expanded to her son lives in Boston and her daughter lives in Chicago. The second example can be expanded to Kim joined the company in 1998 and Pat joined the company in the following year. Next, I will explain about right non-constituent coordination. Look at the example. We gave Kim a book and Pat a CD. They stay in Boston during the week and with their parents at weekends. They called right non-constituent coordination because the coordination occur on the right of the head of the clause. So the head of the clause are gave, stay, and land. There are two distinctive properties here. First, the coordinates do not form constituents in corresponding non-coordination constructions. In we gave Kim a book, the underlined part, Kim a book, does not form a single constituent. It is a sequence of two non-phrases. Kim a book, Pat a CD. Second, the coordinates are required to be syntactically parallel. The separate elements of each coordinate must have the same function in corresponding non-coordination construction. In the clauses, we gave Kim a book and we gave Pat a CD. Both the first elements, Kim and Pat, are indirect objects, and both second elements, a book and a CD, are direct objects. So the first example acceptable. Next, Delayed right constituent coordination. She noticed but didn't comment on his inconsistencies. It is the example of delayed right constituent coordination. In 1b, she noticed his inconsistencies but didn't comment on them. It is the, the example of basic coordination. The delayed right constituent coordination construction has the following properties. The first one, at least one of the coordinates does not form a constituent in corresponding non-coordination construction. In C didn't comment on his inconsistencies, for example, the underlined sequence is not a constituent, since on is head of preposition phrase on his consistencies. Similarly to perfect does not form a constituent to perfect copies, which consists of the determiner to plus head nominal perfect copies. The second property is the elements on the right of the coordination, his inconsistencies, copies, are understood as related to each coordinate. So his inconsistencies relate to notice and didn't comment. Copies relate to perfect copies and for slightly damaged ones. The term bilateral constituent coordination reflects the salient difference between this construction and basic coordination. Jadi, bilateral constituent itu mempunyai perbedaan yang sangat besar dengan basic coordination secara konstruksinya. Like in the example below, she noticed his inconsistencies but didn't comment on them. His inconsistencies di basic coordination muncul di awal as the rightmost constituent of the first coordinate and then is repeated normally in reduced form at the end of the second. So the doubly underlined expressions occur earlier as the rightmost constituent of the first coordinate and then is repeated normally in reduced form at the end of the second. She noticed his inconsistencies but didn't comment on them. It is the example of basic coordination. But in the non-basic coordination, therefore, the elements, his inconsistencies, and them appears to the held back. It delayed. The last one, and attachment coordination. In the example A, the second coordinate is not adjacent to the first coordinate, but it is attached at the end of the clause. In A, Kim was included on the shortlist, but not Pat. But not Pat is attached in the end of the clause. It is not adjacent to the first coordinate. Dave charged the boss with perjury and her secretary placed in the end of the clause. It is not adjacent to the first coordinate. The first coordinate is the boss. Okay, maybe that's all from us. We are sorry if there were a lot of mistakes in our explanation. Please forgive us and thank you so much for watching our video. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. See ya.